Black woman, right? Who I probably have nothing in common with. Um, but we figured it out, and she
You tried to have something in common with.
and I remember I got a compliment at the end. You treated me just like a mother, and it's like, that's what I'm going for, right? Trying to get that trust. So in terms of getting, I make it more. I try to separate, especially when it comes to personal injury. There's not.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Trustcast Show. And we're really happy to have with us Ari Sliffman. Welcome to the show, Ari.
Thank you for having me, Zane. I appreciate it.
So, Ari was the first student in Marquette Law School history to graduate with a dual certificates in dispute resolution and sports law. He published a paper arguing the Super Bowl clean zones are unconstitutional, which courts have since cited, and now runs a 95% settlement rate as a mediator in Philadelphia, who uses emotional intelligence and AI to get people to stop fighting. So here's the opening question. I usually write down the opening question. You wrote a law school paper arguing that the NFL's Super Bowl's clean zones violate the First Amendment, and a court in Arizona actually cited your argument years later to rule against one. What was it like to see that play out?
So that was exciting. As a sports law student, I guess. Prior to law school, I was working in sports, so it just seemed like a natural field to go to Marquette for their sports law program, and I got to interview a lot of different people in sports. The PR director for the NFL, and a few others who are involved in the decision-making process for the Super Bowl. But skipping all of that, kind of seeing my own article being cited was very exciting. And the fact that courts are willing to consider my thoughts when I was a law student more than a few years ago. All right, I must have done something right. Maybe I can do this. So writing was always a passion of mine. Doing the thought process, things like that, which is why it kind of naturally become a mediator. The thought process, the kind of looking at it from all sides. Back to that example, what was the NFL trying to do? What were businesses in the local area trying to accomplish, and balancing those strategies?
So here's the big question. What was the grade on that paper?
Well, there's no grade on that paper.
Oh, okay.
So that was published in the Marquette Sports Law Review,
Oh,
but I did win. I'm patting myself on the back. I did win the sports branding award, writing award that year at Marquette. So kind of to go along with your business with branding and such, I must have gotten pretty good grade if there was one.
yeah. Well, if you don't pat yourself on the back, sometimes your back remains unpadded. I'm a big supporter of that. Um, I'll just move on to the next one. So you've been a plaintiff's attorney and a defense attorney representing major auto manufacturers and individual injury victims. Why did you intentionally build your career on both sides before becoming a mediator?
So first of all, in addition to those, doing some corporate litigation, also products liability and construction. So I built myself on kind of getting a well-rounded experience, because that's what attorneys look for in mediators. They want people who are going to be able to understand not only their side but the other side. I just had this conversation last week with a plaintiff's attorney that they actually prefer defense-oriented mediators because they know how to speak the language to the defense, whether that be in personal injury actions with the attorney and then also the claims adjuster who might be involved for the insurance carrier. That's important to them. On the plaintiff side, I've taken care of the client. I know how to speak to them. I know that I know what they're going through. And so it's, you know, it's good to have the well-rounded nature. And I was purposeful in that when trying to get my experience.
So I was involved in a court action and some years ago, and I'm just thinking of mediation, but and I thought that the other attorney was exceptional, and so I called him on another matter after everything was resolved, and he says, "Well, that's funny that you call me because my client was really mad at me." he she didn't think I performed. So is sometimes the end result of a successful case or situation that neither party is happy, or you're always trying to get both parties happy, but sometimes it's just not possible?
It depends on the nature of the case, right? Personal injury, a bit tougher to make everyone happy. I think more satisfied with the agreement is a better way to describe it. Sometimes if they want to get it settled, the plaintiff will have to take a big haircut and not necessarily be happy about it, but they'll accept it. And sometimes defense will have to pay a little bit more. It's all about risk, right? But then there's corporate litigation and corporate mediations where I very much try, and I am focused on trying not only to help facilitate a solution to the dispute at issue, but say that we have two parties or more that have a long-standing relationship. This dispute is something new. They never had a dispute before, and it's two mid-size or small companies. These are their babies, and they're really emotionally charged. But at the end of the day, I have to sit in there and remind them, look, you had this great relationship. Disputes or conflict is bound to happen. And you want try to take your emotion out of it for a moment, and what is best for your company, right? And the best thing probably for your company, unless it's not, is figuring out this dispute, figuring out how make sure how it doesn't happen again, and then also let's build that relationship more. So that is where both parties will be hopefully happy with the resolution, because we are not only figuring out the issue that brought us together, we are building it back better. That's where I kind of excel as a mediator. I try the option generation and discussing it and being creative. If they're open to it, it's not always the case, but if they're open to it, building a better solution, because frankly, everybody likes money. And if we can build it back better, that means better for both sides.
So it almost sounds like, as a mediator, you're part social worker, psychologist, in addition to being an attorney and supposedly a disinterested party. Is that what it feels like sometimes?
Sometimes. It's funny you bring that up, because I will have to, get on, and that's why I pay attention to the emotional intelligence side of things. I actually just did a CLE with a colleague regarding emotional intelligence and mediation. I'm building another, and CLE is continuing legal education for those in the audience who may not know. We're required to get a certain number of credits every year. And so I'm working on putting another one together regarding mental health and mediation. And so, but yes, I am sitting there actually with whoever the aggrieved party is, and we're talking through this, and I have to be empathetic with them. They have to understand that I get what they're going through to be able to trust me as their mediator. Then maybe I'm not always trying to get them to give something up, but the idea is to facilitate a settlement. I find it easier to gain settlement when I've gained trust from the parties themselves. So that is certainly part of it.
Reposition my camera so I'm in the center here. Okay. Let's see. So you still volunteer as a judge pro tem in Philadelphia Court of Common Pleas. Why do you use that as a testing ground, or do you use that as a testing ground for new mediation techniques?
So, well, as a mediator, I can't really screw it up, or at least I haven't yet. I can't make it so they certainly don't settle. I I like using them for testing ground for different techniques because frankly, I'm volunteering. They're not paying me. I get an hour with each party, so with each case, sometimes more. That is very short in terms of trying to settle a case, right?
Mm-hmm.
Most of my mediations go anywhere from 3 to 7 hours, depending, and some more, right? Some more, but on average, 3 to 7 hours. And so 1 hour is just too quick. I had one yesterday where it was five defendants, and just trying to manage that within an hour is frankly impossible. But I use the testing ground because I I try different strategies. I have a game plan going into each mediation. Each game plan is different. It's tailored to the mediation. But then I'm going to move to the next strategy, right? I have to know when to use each strategy and the right time. So I will try different new strategies, whether I've heard on from a podcast that I was listening to, a mediator I'm connected with on LinkedIn, whatever. And I will try that strategy to see what works. And I'll let them know, hey, I'm going to try something. And it's usually with the attorneys that I already know, not new attorneys. And they appreciate it because, frankly, they don't necessarily trust the fact that I'm using it.
Sorry about that.
No, it's all right. But I get them to trust the process, to trust me that, hey, if it doesn't work, I'm going to switch to something else. I'm not going to do this just to kind of mess up your chances of settlement.
So how do you, I'm just curious for myself. Well, since I'm curious, then probably the audience is curious. So how does a mediator get paid? So who pays the mediator, and how did you contract that in the first place?
So I'm reached out to by one or two attorneys for a case. They have a case. They decide, all right, we want to mediate. Who do we want to mediate with? Usually how it goes is a few names get tossed out by one side. The other side agrees to one of them or not, and then if they don't agree to them, tosses out some more names. So I have to sell to at least two parties, if not more, depending on how many parties there are. And then they reach out to me, they book. In my engagement agreement, it is split equally amongst the parties. So if there are two parties, then split 50-50. If it is not split plaintiff-defendant, it is just split equally. So that, and then chances are that's how it's going to get paid, but sometimes to get that little bit at the end, defense might offer to pay for costs.
Right. So how do attorneys find out about you? So do you have to market to attorneys, or does the court suggest people, or a combination of all those different things?
All the above. So I have that's one of the reasons why I also do the JPT work, Judge Pro Tem work. I am still meeting new attorneys every time I do it. I reach out to them. I figure out a way to differentiate myself from other Judge Pro Tems, which means not only in my act of being the mediator during the session, but also I email them the day before, saying, hey, I'm going to be your mediator, your Judge Pro Tem for the day. Reach out. I have your memos. Reach out to me if you have anything else you want to share before the conference. I don't think anyone else does that. Not everyone who's a Judge Pro Tem is also a mediator. It's often just lawyers in the community who are volunteering to help out the courts. Then I will follow up with them saying, it's great meeting you. Thank you, thank you for coming to settle, or otherwise, depending on how it went. And then I will attach, my CV and fee schedule in my Outlook business card. That way they have my information. And then, I kind of set up a calendar to follow up with everybody. I go to networking events. I do coffees, lunch. I try to do 3 events, if you will, per week. So that would be either a happy hour, lunch, coffee, whatever networking event the bar association's doing, anything like that. I try to do 3 a week, and just grow my practice. I also have a pretty big presence on LinkedIn, and I'm there almost every day to try to remind people I exist. And I also have a newsletter that goes out once a month.
Wow, you do a lot of outreach. So do you have other attorneys that work with you? Are you a solo shop, or how do you?
Me, myself, and I.
Okay.
I am the CEO, CMO, CTO, CFO. Although my wife may try to take CFO as her title, but she calls herself chief of staff, though. So
No, that's not like an actual staff, though, right?
No, just me. She.
I mean, a staff that she uses to
That too. That too. She wields it well
to contain you.
Yes. So I will. It's a lot. The mediation is the easy part. When I'm in that room mediating, that's the easy part. It comes naturally. It just happens. Everything else is the stressful part. So
you have a 95% settlement rate, which is pretty damned impressive. So walk me through what you're actually doing in the room that gets 2 sides that maybe hate each other sometimes to agree on some situation.
So, a lot. I do a lot. First of all, I start before the typical mediation day starts. I get memorandum and briefs explaining exactly what the case is about, positions, thoughts on settlement from each party. A certain amount of that information will be shared amongst the parties, but there's also confidential information. I will then develop kind of a list of questions to discuss with each attorney prior to the mediation. So I will have pre-mediation calls, usually 20 to 30 minutes per attorney. We will go through different things, including logistics, but mostly talking about the issues of the case. I will want to know about their client. I will want to know, really the personality, how I can relate to them. I take it so seriously that I figured out how to relate to a 78-year-old Black woman, right? Who I probably have nothing in common with. But we figured it out, and
you tried to have something in common with.
And I remember I got a compliment at the end. You treated me just like a mother. And it's like, that's what I'm going for, right? Trying to get that trust. So in terms of I make it more, I try to separate, especially when it comes to personal injury. There's not a lot of joint session. There is some where, at the beginning, I'll bring everyone together. Maybe there's opening statements, maybe there's not. I'll give everyone my instructions to start. I try to cool the room and make it more comfortable for everyone, even if there are high emotions. And then I'll end up talking to each party individually, what's called a caucus. And then at times throughout the mediation, I may bring the attorneys back together. Sometimes I'll bring the parties together, especially if it's a corporate litigation case, a corporate dispute, and where you might have more sophisticated parties who really know the product, who really know what the issue is. And I need to get them in the same room because I'm not always the right person to deliver the piece of information that is being shared by the other side. Especially if there is a lot of emotion behind what is being shared. If it's negative emotion, I will take their message, reframe it. I hope no one minds that, I'm sharing my secrets here, but I hope my clients in this area don't mind me, but giving away my secrets. But
So I find if you have a trade secret, and you're trying to sell it to somebody, you have to drag them kicking and screaming, no matter how great the idea is. It's
yeah,
like,
right. It's so I say that it's a very emotionally charged message. All right, here's our new demand, but if they don't come back with X, Y, and Z, we're walking out of here, right? Well, that's delivering that message is not helpful, right? It's just not gonna do much unless it does in very small circumstances, very few circumstances. I will take a moment, reframe the message, give it to the other side. So I try to take some of that emotion out of it when I'm reframing for the other side. And sometimes I'll put it on myself. Sometimes I'll blame the attorney. Sometimes I'll blame the client. Depends on the situation. But I use these strategies to obviously facilitate a settlement. I don't take offense if we don't get a settlement done. It is not my fault. I can think of a few times where, sure, could I have done something different? Absolutely. But I have a whole bag of tricks, and I will use everything to try to get it done. And so I will, it's just, I need the patience from the parties and the attorneys, because the longer they wait it out, the longer they push, the more likely we're going to get to a settlement.
So your first private mediation, the parties were $300,000 apart, and you started talking about sports and pain treatment before touching the case. Why did that work?
Oh, wow. You really dug into that one. I think
I told you I was going to surprise you at one point.
was that on LinkedIn or a blog maybe? I don't know.
I don't know. I gave it to my researcher and I said, get the skinny on Ari.
All right. Well, those parties, I never admitted to them that it was my first. At some point I'll have to do that. But there was this is my connection to the plaintiff. All right. This was a personal injury action. It's an older person, 62 years old at the time. And it was he was a union worker. And would get a lot of benefits at 67 if he waited to retire from his job. It was actually more than $300,000 apart. He was up at like $700,000. His clients actually needed me to talk to him. He was just pie in the sky. Mostly to blame from all the billboards that you see on 95 in Philadelphia, and variety of commercials.
We'll get you $1 million.
Exactly. And so he just wasn't buying into the process yet. And mostly because the other side wasn't budging, because there was this back surgery recommendation, and he hadn't gotten it. And it had been a number of years since the incident. He hadn't gotten it. So we just started chatting. I didn't start with talking about as you mentioned, talking about the case. We talked about sports. He's a Philly fanatic, not the mascot, but he's a big Philly fan. The Eagles were doing well that year. The Phillies were doing well. So we just sort of talked about that, kind of stuck, and we were talking about that for 5-10 minutes. And then we got into, he had neck and back issues where he had to get injections into his back, which are not comfortable. They're called epidural steroid injections. I've actually gotten them. So I related to him that I got them, and to kind of empathize and get him to understand that I understand, I may not need back surgery, but I understand the pain that he's going through. I've felt it myself. And then we talked about the money. We're like, all right, let's just break this down. Forget your demand for a moment. Let's break this down. And the gentleman had taken money out of various accounts to pay for his treatment. He wanted to get his retirement pension fully vested, and if he had done the surgery, he would have been out too long on rehab because of his older age, and he would have lost his ability to get his full pension. And so we're like, okay, but he was willing to wear a back brace, to take pain meds every day. Luckily, not anything serious, just high level Advil or whatever. But I believed him when he said he was going to get that surgery in 5 years. And he just wanted to fight through it. And one thing a Philly jury's going to appreciate, they're going to relate to that because he's a blue collar guy who is who's gonna play well to a jury. So we added up all the money, and we added up to whatever number it was, and including paying back his attorneys, so that way he wouldn't be made whole and get money for his surgery and a little bit extra for pain and suffering. We agreed on all these numbers, and it was much, much lower than the $750 or whatever he was demanding. And I presented it to the defense, and they didn't have the money that day, which is typical. They might need to go.
You got to go check with somebody.
Yeah, exactly. Especially when you're going over a certain level. And I told them, look, I believe this guy. He's going to get this surgery. And more importantly, a jury's going to believe that he's going to get this surgery. And they ended up settling within $25,000 of that number. If I hadn't sat down and related to him and talked about things that frankly have nothing to do with this mediation, but really did because I needed to get him to trust me, I don't think we get there.
It sounds like a lot of work and a lot of thinking that has to go into each one of these things, and some real bridge building. So why did you not continue in a traditional role as attorney and decided instead you're going to go with this mediation?
So I decided to. ADR, alternative dispute resolution, has been something I've loved since law school. I did go to Marquette because I thought, I'm going to be a sports lawyer. I've already have this experience on the business side of sports. I want to keep doing it. It's a great program. But then I got involved with the dispute resolution program, which is also a top 5 program at the time in the nation. And so I ended up taking a few classes. I met the director of the program, who became a mentor of mine. I ended up being a research assistant for her. And it was just always something that was in the back of my mind. And I even wrote an article, although I didn't try to get it published. I wrote something combining sports law and dispute resolution. One of my classes in this, and we don't need to get into politics, but
this is your show. Whenever I have somebody on, you could go off on any political thing you want to know, and you'll never know where I stand.
Yeah, well, very apt. With today, part of my international conflict resolution class, we went to Israel, and I had to draft. As part of our final, we had
except on Israel, you'll know where I stand, which is I'm a big supporter. So if anybody doesn't like that, then don't watch.
Glad to hear it. So I have, we have. Got distracted there for a moment. I had to write an article, paper, final for that class on some sort of dispute and proposal for international dispute, and some proposal for fixing it and settling this dispute. And then I also had to write an article, final, for one of my papers in sports law. And so I decided, and I need to read this, maybe send it to someone, that Israel, along with Gaza and really the Palestinian Authority, should co-host either the Olympics or the World Cup. And as a way of, and this is way before the current conflict, right? This is 2011. And use that as a way to settle disputes.
Wow, that would have been something.
Yes. So maybe I should submit it somewhere. But yeah.
They'll probably submit you for the loony bin.
Yeah, maybe. But
But
anyway,
I
I
mean,
got off topic a
there's
little
great
bit.
dreams. Got to start somewhere.
Yeah, but in closer to real time, I started after COVID kind of opened back up. They were searching for volunteers for that Judge Pro Tem program. I volunteered because you know what? I want to see if this is something I want to do, and it is, and it was. So I then started focusing back around 2020 on that. How can I become a mediator? Because I am probably 15 at this point, 15 years younger than the second youngest mediator in Philadelphia. And I was at a firm prior to my current situation, my current business, where 4 out of the 6 partners on a Friday afternoon decided, hey, we're shipping out. We're creating our own firm. I was left with 2 of the remaining partners. And I said, hey, this is something I'm thinking about doing. And they said, go, bring it in. And I did. I started bringing it in. And then one thing led to another. I just wanted to, I kept feeling that pull, right? Once you start something on your own, as you probably know, you feel that pull and that drive to really build it. Ended up going part-time for a little bit with the law firm. But then I remember November 20th, 2024. I only remember it, frankly, because it's also my father's birthday. Was my last day at my old firm for part-time, and I was officially AJS Resolutions.
So we were going to we had to get to AJS Resolutions. Have to get you a plug in here, and we're going to run out of time so here's some fun rapid fire questions. But then we're going to go back to AJS Resolutions. Baltimore Orioles or Philadelphia Eagles, which fandom runs deeper?
Baltimore Orioles.
Okay.
Yeah.
So favorite Baltimore Oriole player of all time?
All time, it's probably got to be Cal Ripken. I know that's an easy answer, but also that's A. B would probably be Chris Hoyles because I was a catcher as a kid.
Yeah.
And he dominated Randy Johnson.
And what?
He dominated Randy Johnson, which I always
really?
Yeah.
So, Cal Ripken is an easy answer, but it's also, I don't know. To me, it's the only answer. The Iron Man of baseball. Wow. Okay, best negotiation tactic you learn from watching sports.
Wow, that's a good one. I would think the covering of the mouths during the pitching, watching pitching coaches or whatever, covering their mouths, with all the cheating that happened. I think that's a negotiation tactic because, frankly, you have no idea what they're saying anyway. But I would, faking it because I see lawyers, they will just, even in joint session, just reach over and talk to their client like this. And you have no idea what they're saying. They may be totally faking it. I know I did sometimes as an attorney. Also, some people do it during depositions, little tricks, little signs or whatever. Not kosher in my opinion, but people do it.
Darn it. I thought I turned this off. Apparently not. That's my actual boss there. It's my wife. So I'll have to get that in a minute.
You wield the spear.
The staff, yeah. So a Torah position that taught you something about mediation you didn't expect.
Oh boy.
Is that too weird?
So you found my Times of Israel blog, huh? I think one of my favorites is the few portions about Joseph with his brothers and how negotiating. They were actually, they came begging for food and whatever, and Joseph he knew who they were. They didn't know who he was, and kind of testing all that metal with them. I think that was one of the greatest negotiation tactics. Also, Moses and Aaron, obviously the masters. But yeah, I think Joseph would be one of my favorites.
Um, so I'm running out of time. So I'm going to go on to AJS resolution, and you say your tagline is modern mediation for modern litigation. What's broken about the way mediation is traditionally done?
Sorry, repeat that.
I see your tagline is modern mediation for modern litigation. What's broken about the way mediation is traditionally done?
So I wouldn't say anything's broken. I think it's just a new way of doing it. The biggest before I got into mediation as my real-time job, I was collecting market research about what are the pain points that people have regarding mediators. A big one was they sit there and tell war stories. Some of the older mediators, and sometimes that helps. Doing the experience from my experience, this, but I didn't find that they were using it in that way. So, and also, I bill hourly. Eventually, I would like to bill a flat fee. That would be also part of the modern mediation. I also use AI for help which helps in terms of me understanding, not only understanding everything going on in complex litigation, but if someone points to some document or I'm looking for something, it is so much easier for me to find it. When people give me 1,000 pages of documents, if I'm using a system, I obviously have ethics guidelines and HIPAA laws and all that to deal with. But how I do it is approved by the ethics lawyers, and it's just so much quicker. I'm not charging the clients for it, meaning flipping through thousands of pages. I'm able to find it in a minute.
So if someone, another attorney, insurance company, a company wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
My website is ajsresolutions.com. All my information's on there. You can even you don't even have to talk to me. You can actually even just book straight on my website, which is the best because, when did this come in? So we'll all get notices. I have an awesome vendor who, as soon as that's clicked to submit a mediation or an arbitration, I will we'll all receive notices. We'll all receive calendar invites. We'll all receive Zoom links if it's online. Everything will just be kind of taken care of. That's also part of the modern mediation, making it easier, leveraging modern technology to make the whole process from logistics through the mediation easier.
Well, Ari, thanks for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. I'm sure our audience does, and I learned a lot. Thanks so much for tuning in today. If you have a suggestion for a guest for our show, email us at support@trustcastshow.com, and we'll get the conversation started.